Are you sick and tired of going to your in-laws for Thanksgiving? Are you worried about your 13-year-old's mental health? Or maybe you think it's finally time for the vasectomy. Or perhaps you just don't like when your spouse wears the color green. These apply to you. It's time for a difficult conversation. And today, I'm going to give you all the tips and tricks on how to start and have a successful yet hard conversation with your spouse or significant other. And if you stick to the end, I'm going to share with you a common error that you should avoid. Let's start with a first and important point, which is that you need to prepare by breaking the regular pattern. So what do I mean by that? Chances are part of what makes raising a particular topic really hard is that you already have some kind of pattern in the relationship for how the conversation goes. Maybe the pattern has been avoidance. Every single time you bring up what you're doing for Thanksgiving, there's a topic change. Thanksgiving is still months away. Or can we talk about this another time? Or you know how important it is for my parents that we show up. Right? And whatever that avoidant move is, then gets you onto another topic and you don't engage it. Maybe the pattern is some big unproductive blow up, right? That ends with like arms crossed, people walking out of the room. Maybe it's something in between, right? Maybe it's every single time we do this, your partner wins and you lose. Or every single time we do this, all we can see is the things we really dislike about the person who is our significant other. So in order to be successful, right, what we're going to do this time is going to look different. You need to map out, how am I going to initiate this conversation in a different way and conduct it in a way that we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but one thing is we're going to avoid the regular pattern. Because I think part of what makes these so hard is that we get into a rut and we don't see any other way out of that rut. Secondly, and related to this preparation, is finding a right time and place for the conversation. So in all of the work that I've done, so many times when people come to me, they're saying, oh, I need some help with some hard conversation. And what's making it hard is that they're not actually ever initiating a conversation. It's always starting from a point of reaction, not from a point of calm and purpose. So I'm going to give you an example. Some years ago, I was working with a client mostly on professional issues, but then he brought up a personal issue. So specifically, this is a situation where over a long period of time, his significant other would raise with him the issue of whether or not he had gotten exercise, when he had gone to the gym that day. And it turns out, right, this guy actually really didn't like going to the gym very much. And so he would always say like, oh, I didn't know, or I've been busy today, or I'm doing the best I can. And in this one particular example, right, he says to me like, oh yeah, last week, my wife asked me if I went to the gym and I told her I had gotten a haircut that day. And she was like, so what? And he's like, yeah, well, you have those like hairs, those sticky hairs in the back of your neck. And then when you sweat, it's really itchy. So I didn't exercise rather. And I was like, I can't even believe this is the conversation. And so I said to him, I'm really curious, like when this conversation comes up, what emotions come up for you? And he's like, well, I'm just frustrated. I was like, okay, well, what else? He's like, well, I feel like she shouldn't do that. I was like, okay, that's good. That's not a feeling. What other feelings come up? And he's like, well, I'm frustrated. I'm like, yes, you said that. What other feelings come up? And he's like, yeah, I'm angry. I'm like, okay. And then I just had this sense. I was like, do you feel some shame? And he burst into tears. And I was like, okay, well, say more. What do you feel shame about? And he's like, I grew up in this family where my older sister was like this super jock athlete. And I was like this geeky nerd. And every time anything touching on sports or athletics came up, I just felt like a disappointment. And every single time she brings this up, I actually feel like a huge letdown. I was like, huh. I was like, well, I'm curious. What if you had a conversation where you brought up the emotions that you feel when she raises the exercise question? How do you think she'd react? He's like, well, I never thought about that. I was like, okay, well, do you think she'd be open to that conversation? He's like, yeah, totally. Like, she's great. I'm like, huh. I'm like, do you think then you could find a different way for her to raise the issue? Because she cares about your physical health, right? That's why she's raising this. And she's probably mystified about why she's getting such a strong negative reaction. But I wonder if you shared the feelings with her about the way she brings it up, whether the two of you could then find a way to talk about it differently. He's like, oh, I totally think I should do that. And so what we were able to craft was a really different conversation, one that he would initiate at the right time and place, and on the topic that was really at the heart of the issue. And so this leads to the third important point, which is that if you're going to go into a difficult conversation, you need to speak from your perspective, your experience of the situation, and not from what is objectively true or right. Going back to our example, right? It is not the case that the way she was raising the issue of exercise was bad or wrong or not okay. What was true, though, is that the way he was experiencing it brought up deep feelings of shame and inadequacy. When you speak from your experience, it's very hard for any loving partner or spouse to tell you you're wrong. However, when you speak from this is the truth, the way you're doing this is wrong, you're almost definitely inviting a fight. And you're perhaps going back to that old pattern. Fourth important point is it can't just be one way, right? This is a conversation. It is not a delivery of a message. And that means that as part of any good, difficult conversation, you have to make space for their viewpoint. Now, if they are skilled, they will express their viewpoint as their viewpoint. But if they are less skilled, they may share their viewpoint as the truth. You have a perspective, but I know what actually happened. And so during this time when they're sharing their viewpoint, as much as possible, you want to avoid evaluating what they're saying or telling them they're wrong. And you want to constantly active listen and say, so it sounds like this is how you've seen it. It sounds like your experience of it has been this. From your perspective, here's why A, B, and C is right. In none of those examples have I agreed with my spouse's viewpoint. But in all of them have I heard it and taken it into account. And this is where we lead to the fifth point. Because some of you might be saying, great, so I've spoken my perspective, they've spoken their perspective. What shall we do now? Hire a judge or a mediator? Or shall we fight it out? No. The point here is not to agree on who's right and who's wrong. It is simply to say we each see this differently. And now we have this great opportunity as a couple. We have an adventure, which is how can we problem solve around different experiences of the situation. Now, you might think this is a certain sleight of hand here, but I want to say it's really good framing because it presents an opportunity and an invitation for you as a couple to problem solve in a way that doesn't need to persuade who's right and who's wrong, but gives an adventure or an opportunity to see how creative we can be. Let me share with you an example. One of my dear friends and her partner have a young teenager who has been struggling around a whole bunch of mental health issues, which are really all over the place with young teenagers. And they've had very different views, both of what the teenager has been doing and what a solution has been. And they've had a history of pretty rancorous fights between them about how to intervene. But at a breaking point, I had the really honor of sitting down with both of them and really helping facilitate a hard conversation between them, where what we discovered is they're really not going to see eye to eye on the nature of or causes of the problem, but they have a very shared interest in pointing their daughter in the right direction. And so that shared interest allowed them to really team up and come up with, I would say, a quite sophisticated plan and a joint plan of things that they could do and how they could support each other and their daughter through this really hard period. And so this leads to the sixth point, and it's a really important one. I think it's one that people forget, which is what we're doing here is having difficult conversations, which means we need to avoid writing scripts and we need to expect mistakes. I always admire when someone writes a script for a difficult conversation because it means they care a lot, and I always tell them to throw it away because you can't script a difficult conversation. No matter how skilled you are, no matter how hard you try, it is a conversation around strong emotions, different perceptions, and where we're trying to break often patterns that have existed for a very long time. And so what that means is that there are going to be errors. There are going to be times in the conversation when I say something I wish I didn't say and where the other person says something that they might regret saying. And so as a norm, I want to make it okay for those mistakes to happen. It really goes back to that first point, right? We have this pattern. The downside of the pattern is it ends poorly. The upside of the pattern is it's predictable. But now we're doing something really different. And so the downside of that is we don't know where it's going to go. But the upside of that is it has great possibilities for something different. So, if you're planning a difficult conversation with your spouse about anything, remember these points. First, prepare to break the regular pattern of interaction. Second, plan an appropriate time and place for the conversation. Third, speak your perspective, not the objective truth. Fourth, work hard to solicit their viewpoint and to acknowledge it as their viewpoint. Fifth, reframe the challenge from a problem to an adventure to work on together. And lastly, avoid scripts and expect to make mistakes. If you want more skills on how to improve communication in a relationship, watch this next video, which is what are good communication skills in a relationship. And if you want to learn more about negotiation and difficult conversations generally, take a look at my website, CambridgeNegotiationInstitute.com. Finally, I'd be really grateful if you could subscribe to this channel, like this video, and ring the bell. I'm Bob Bordone, and thanks for negotiating together. Okay, you know you could use some new communication skills in your relationship. Click here, keep watching.